notice. It's appreciated.
Yeah, no problem at all. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start with the connection issues to begin with, this top area that Ken touched on at the beginning, where you go into ACT and AMA is not working. You come here, you click on the marketing automation, and it does not load this screen here. All of these things that you see right here that I have listed under one, AMA view and ACT is blank, groups appear missing. When using AMA, any fixes to AMA log out aside from restarting, click marketing automation menu and getting welcome screen. All of these are related to API issues or a token expiring when you're working with it. And the fix for most of them is just to make sure that the API is working and that you have a fresh token. So we'll get started with looking at the issue where it's blank or it gives you the JWT token issue. First thing that I would do when I come in here, if it's blank, is I just close completely out of ACT, right click on the ACT desktop icon, and then choose run as administrator, and then try and launch it again and see if it is then showing the interface. If it doesn't show the interface, then what I would do next is I would come here to the website and I would type in the API URL here for what my current API URL is. And then you just need to append swagger/index.html. And then you're going to put in your username, your password, and then your database name. And then you just hit login. Now, if it doesn't pull up this page and you know that the API URL is correct, or you click login here and it doesn't actually finish logging in, then that is a key to showing you that it's not working correctly, that the API URL is not working correctly. And this doesn't have to be a ground to cloud URL. This can be whatever you have set up through web hosted. But if you come to this Swaggart site and it doesn't load, then that means the API URL is not working or accessible from the outside world. And if you try and log in and it doesn't give you a bearer token here at the bottom, then that also is a good key to show you that the API URL is not working. And in order for AMA to work, the API URL has to be working. Now, another thing,
Andy, we also have our own internal API tester, so you can get that from our website. Everyone should be familiar with that as well.
Okay.
But I like this /swagger/index.html as well.
And then what you can do with this bearer token that you have here at the bottom is you can copy this, and if you're not sure if it's accessing the correct database or the correct user, what you can do is you can go to a website called jwt.io. You can scroll down and in the encoded, paste in that token, and then it's going to output the information that you have for the login. It's going to give you the ACT GUID for the user. It's going to give you the username. It's going to tell you what the server is local. In this case, it's my local machine. It'll give you the database name that the token is carrying. It'll give you the issuer or the server that it's trying to connect to, and it tells you the language and everything like that as well. So this information is pretty valuable when you're trying to troubleshoot if you're having issues with it. Sometimes what you guys can do, if you guys are having a particularly difficult issue with getting a customer to connect, you can contact me, and if you provide me the serial number that they're using in their database, and if you're not 100% sure what that is, you can come here into ACT, click on my account, and then click on subscription info, and that's where the serial number is going to be. Otherwise, you can also go inside Act and grab the serial number from there and shoot that over to me. But the important thing here is that when you're having issues with it, that we make sure that the connection is working correctly, and also that the connection that we're trying to use is the same login information that we have here inside of the bearer token. So if you shoot me over that information, what I can do is I can look up that particular serial number and look at all the hits in our audit log and see if there's a bearer token being presented for that day in the audit log. And if there is, I can, get that bearer token, and I can check this information for you to verify whether or not it's passing the correct login information that you guys are trying to use for that database. So that's if you're having any difficulties specifically with it, and doing the normal troubleshooting isn't fixing the problem. So the next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go into Microsoft Services, and you can just go into search on Windows and type in services.msc.
Not sure if you're showing the right screen, but we're not seeing anything other than the list.
Yeah, I don't have it on that screen here. Just a second. So it would be here, and you just type in services. And since I do this enough, it automatically pops up for me, but you would just click here, and I like to run it as administrator when it comes up. And then that'll bring up this screen here. And then the next thing that I like to do here is I like to make sure that Act is closed. So I'm going to actually close out of Act, and I'm going to come down here to Connect Link. And this is only if you're using Connect Link, this particular part of it. I usually choose to stop it and then start it. Another thing that I like to do is I like to go into Start and go into IIS Reset. Sorry. So you'll bring up your command prompt, run it as an administrator. And then just type in IIS Reset, and it'll stop and start the IIS server. And then once that's done, I'll go back into Act and see if it's loading correctly.
Is there any special properties that we should change with ACL, delayed start or special permissions?
I couldn't tell you that, Ken. I normally don't do any of the configuration settings or anything like that. That's stuff that Rodney and those guys would be doing. And if frontline support is unable to fix an issue with the API, they escalate it to Rodney and those guys to take a look at it after that.
We've got a direct line to Rodney if needed.
So after we've done all that, we come back in, it should load the screen. And if it doesn't, you'll again want to come back here and make sure that it's connecting through Swagger and that you're getting a JWT token. Next thing that I like to do is if I am getting a JWT token and I'm still having some difficulties like pulling groups or something like that, I like to use an application called Postman. There are other API applications that you can use like Insomnia and stuff like this, but Postman is one that I use to test and see if it's working correctly. And so what I do here is I take the URL, the API URL, which is this. Then I'm going to throw that in the get field. And then I'm going to type in authorize here. And I'm going to take the bearer token that I got from logging into Swagger. and I'm going to go to this authorization here, make sure it's set to bearer token, and I'm going to paste that bearer token in here. And then I'm going to go ahead and click send. And what this is, well, if I spell authorize correctly, it'll work.
Did you lose the bearer token last? Oh,
It's just saying that the URL is not available here. Just a second.
What happened?
Let's see here. I'm probably not typing in my URL correctly is probably what I'm doing. We're not getting the URL in there correctly. If this doesn't work to get the URL, you can also do it inside a Act as well. Yeah. Let's do this. So if you come into Act and you go to Act Connect,
that used to work, eh?
it has been a while since I've been in on this Act Connect page to see if it.
Now it's the marketplace.
Oh, does it open this up every time you go in there
Yes.
and not load?
Oh, it looks like you got that. Not
Yeah.
sure.
So this is the URL it should be using here
Okay.
at the top there. There we go. So of course, if you don't have that API URL typed in correctly, then you're going to get the ground to cloud is not available. What this does by putting the authorize in here is it takes the old bearer token that I have and it refreshes it. And so what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to copy this output here back into this box. And then I'm going to want to type in API / and then groups after this, because I want to see if I can pull my groups. And as you can see, I got a return here of all the groups that I have in my database. So that lets me know that the groups are accessible. Now, if there was a specific group that I was looking for to look at, then I could search for the group name and maybe grab the URL. So for instance, I could look for this group here, grab the GUID of that, type in / and hit the GUID and then hit send. And then this will give me how many contacts I have in the group, or should give some kind of an idea of how many contacts I have in the group. I can even go a little bit further and I can type in contacts after that, and then it'll load the number of contacts. Now keep in mind that if you do this, you're going to end up if there's a lot of contacts, it may time out because it is too much for it to load. And that's when you're going to want to, change the things that it's looking for or ask for a return that is less than, what you're asking it for. I found that if customers have a huge amount of custom fields in here, it's better to narrow the field search to see if the groups are loading. If you can't get the contacts to load at all, even for a small group, so this is a really good test to do on like the test databases or the demo databases to see if you can get anything to load. If you're not able to get anything to load, then you're probably having an issue with the environment and it's timing out or losing connection there. But this is usually what I use to see if we're having problems maybe with the API version and stuff like that. And another thing that you can do, instead of typing groups here, is I can type in system and it'll give me, interesting. This could be related to that issue that we are having with ground to cloud.
Which issue would that be?
It's the one where Mark is having was working with the company that we work with ConnectLink, and the hosting of the actual URLs is not consistent. And that's why from what I understand, they are recommending that customers, if they can, host their own or be hosted through web hosting versus using the ground to cloud connect, because ConnectLink is not as reliable as it used to be.
It's less reliable now?
I mean, I don't know if they've changed anything in the last, since we had our partner meeting in October of last
Okay.
year. I don't know if they've changed anything from there. I certainly have not heard anything from Mark that it has changed. So as far as I'm aware, there's still issues with ConnectLink, and they were actually looking at trying to find a different provider, or maybe purchase the ConnectLink service and then host it ourselves and maintain it ourselves. But I haven't heard an update from that, and that's why what I've heard is the best thing to do is to host,
Host it through IIS or through a hosting
correct.
provider or through APC. That's what we've been recommending, and that's been our go-to solution. We just came up with a recent utility that called ACL Companion that actually restarts the ACL and the API every single night. That's proven to be, from some people's account, a lot more reliable. I remember that they were changing the address. Is that correct? ACL was changing the address at times as well.
That could be the case, is where, so from my understanding, the part of the problem was sometimes what ConnectLink was doing is they were actually disabling whatever the URL is that you get originally. And once they disable that, you can't get it again, and they're actually no longer hosting it. And so in those cases, you'd never see it come up. And as you can see, I'm working again, but the intermittency of this definitely would cause problems, where sometimes I'm able to connect and sometimes I get that ground to cloud not available option. That's going to cause issues, especially if you're trying to send a large group. At
Right.
that time, you're going to have a disconnect, and if it doesn't reconnect during the time where it's trying to make that connection, or it attempts too many times during that time frame, then what it's going to do is it's going to pause the campaign, and it's not going to allow the send to go through.
So
And
this
so
is this is kind of getting into the area that you're not normally troubleshooting on, right? Because this is
correct,
specifically ACL. Okay.
correct. But
And
that gives you an idea of the issues that we're having with the ConnectLink and what kinds of things that you'll see there. Another thing that can cause issues with this groups appear missing when AMA is customers using more than one database. So let's say that I have this database here, or this campaign here, but I created this campaign from a different database, not this one, not the Andy AMA database. I created it from a different database. If I went in there while I was logged into this database and I tried to look at the groups, or let's say I created that campaign, went in a different database, came in here, and I wanted to add the groups from that other database in here, or I didn't remember that I created this campaign from a different database. If I went in here and I went to campaign properties and tried to change the list name here, it's not going to give me the option to change the groups and stuff like that, because I'm not logged in as the user that created it, or maybe the database that's available. So it's not going to give me the options to change that information. Or if I click on there and it doesn't, it gives me a drop down, but it doesn't give me a list of groups, that could be the issue. So one of the suggestions that I have is, when customers create new campaigns, I recommend that they put in the smart tags what database. it was created in.
Okay.
And so then when I have this group selection, and as you can see, I'm not getting a group, and this is probably related to that issue that we were talking about with ground to cloud. If I come here and I click on this, I may not get a response again. You see that? So the intermittency of that ground to cloud connection will cause issues with this as well. So ensuring that that's up, and this is a great way to do it because we're able to see over and over again, you know, if there's an issue there. And that same issue that we saw before, where I come here and I restart this, we'll fix it. But if it's as bad and intermittent as I'm currently experiencing, the customer is going to have a lot of problems when we're doing that, right? And there you go. Now you can see that I have the group showing. So that's a really good way, you know, just going in and stopping and restarting the Act Connect link if they're running that can help. If they're using a web hosted, you can try and stop and start the web hosted service. You know, you can go into IIS and try and reset that. As Ken had said, you guys do have tools to do those things. So I would recommend using those tools. And as you can see, even though I was already logged into ACT, stopping and starting that service helped fix the problem without having to close ACT.
So just to pause for a second, I mean, remembering that we've got internal API functions like insights and you know, dynamic dashboards and the welcome screen, those don't require an external connection like ACL. So the purpose of ACL is to provide, you know, a pathway back to the database that's sending the information. So my question is this: if we have a connection that is valid and it works to send out a campaign, and there is any intermittency preventing the communication back to the database with campaign results, do those results remain queued until a connection is available, or can that actually affect the campaign statistics?
So that it can affect the campaign statistics, only if ACT does not return an error message in the web API log. So
is there something that we can do once a connection, an API connection, is reestablished to force a sync of all those?
So we go here to admin, you go here to CRM, ACT history sync. Anything that has been reported as an error during syncing will be in this page.
So guys, this is a really important issue to pay attention to, because this is a common customer complaint where they're reporting that their statistics or the results that they're exporting don't jive with what they're seeing in their dashboard as well.
And it can take a little while for this page to load for some reason. Probably because I have a lot of information in here. So the options that you have here are pending, completed, and rejected. So I can take a quick look at completed. These are ones that are completed, and the most recent campaign that I sent out was in January. I can take a look at rejected if I have anything rejected, and here's some rejected ones, and the error message returned. Batch failed. Sometimes this means that the contact doesn't exist in the database anymore. But in essence, it means that it failed, or the API returned an error message that it was unable to write this to it. So what I can do at this point, once I see that this error message has occurred, and also keep in mind that it only does this for a certain amount of time here. At the bottom, you'll see here that it tells you how long I keep this information for. So right here, completed data is retained for 3 months, rejected data is contained for 6 months. So if the customer is outside of those windows, you're not going to see the data in here.
Okay.
So once I see that there's information that has not written to my database, what I can do is I can choose this right here and choose reset sync under the actions menu. Now what you'll do is if I hit retrieve again here, I can go to pending. And here in a little bit, what you should see is you should see that those options will show up in my pending queue again for all that. And I don't know how long it takes for that to show up here to switch from reset sync here to that. But you see how you get the email has been submitted. You will receive an email confirmation when they're requeued for sync. So
Andy, we say you don't know. Are you talking like, an hour or a day? Like,
I've heard both.
yeah,
okay.
it takes time, and the more users that we get, and the more jobs that are running, the longer it takes, basically. So it depends on. I just received 2 email messages saying that they've been requeued, so we should be able to look and see. And so this isn't like something where you're sitting there wondering what's happening, because they should receive an email, and this is the email that they receive. Okay, and that's going to go to the
FYI, that says that it's been started, and I still think it takes extra time to push those out.
Oh,
so
it absolutely does. This
Okay.
does not mean that it's going into the database. As you can see, the status is pending.
Okay, so my question then, Andy, is when it stays pending, should it move over? What happens if it stays in pending and it doesn't move over? Do you do another request to sync or reset sync, or
If
how
it
does
stays
that-
in pending and it's not moving from pending, then you have either a connectivity issue, or maybe that contact doesn't exist in the database anymore. Maybe it's a different database. So keep in mind that this particular interface right here is not database specific. It's overall AMA related. And so if a customer send out a campaign in a database, and then deleted that database, created a new database with the same contacts in it, those contacts from that other database would sit here in pending, or might go to batch failed, because that database no longer exists and it can't reach it.
Yeah, I think most of our customers are pretty much just one database though. So I don't suspect that we'll encounter that a lot, but I know we have had reports of like their campaign results table not matching with what the dashboard says, and trying to figure out how to get those two in sync. So now we know we can go to actions and then do the reset sync to try to push those to the campaign results table, correct?
Correct. And
Okay,
and
thank you.
that's the first step to doing it. Now, the next thing to do is, if we have a particular customer that's having difficulties writing, we can copy this and we can go down into email research here, the transactional data. And I can look up that email address and hit retrieve. And what I can do here is I can see if any of these have successfully written ever. And as you can see, I do have some successful writes in here.
Another thing to check out, Shannon, and others, Andy actually worked on me with the client with this that wasn't scoring properly. The one user who was trying to score it, they actually were limited access to those contacts, so they didn't have access to the contacts. So it's another thing to check as well. Make sure the
Correct.
user that's trying to retrieve it has access.
Yeah, there's also that tip that I gave last week, which Andy taught me, is if you're having scoring issues, go into the admin, go to the scoring, and delete the default scoring profile. What we found is, and what you explained to me, Andy, is that the original user may not have had sufficient permissions, and
Correct.
deleting it will just we'll delete it, and then it will recreate with your admin count. And we went from 3 records with scoring to 110,000. And that takes about 24 hours, but it was pretty easy.
Yeah. And to do that, all you have to do, I'm going to do this real quick just so everybody can see. if you just have the default scoring rule in here, if I click on delete here, it's going to delete it, but automatically recreate the default.
Mhm.
So there isn't much involved in doing it. And if I go in here, you'll see that it has the default scoring that's set up for AMA when you do that. So it's not that difficult if they only have one scoring profile to get it to recreate. And you just need to make sure that the user that you're logged into the database with has those permissions that they need in order to write that information.
And then you could force a rescore, right?
Correct. And then all you have to do is click on this rescore and it'll rescore it.
So when you delete the default, the AMA score field stays whatever the old one was until you do the rescore.
Yeah, so if you're changing the map to field, you'll have to go in after you delete it and change that to whatever you want it to write to. But by default, it's automatically going to change it back to the AMA score. So the important thing is that whoever creates this scoring profile has access to the contacts to write the data to them. And that kind of goes along the same line of what we're talking about here. I mean, most of this stuff here, we've kind of covered this API stuff here.
Andy, let me just ask you a question. I know I've watched enough of Brent Milner's videos that when he's had some issues with AMA, he's clicked on the welcome page, he's clicked on insights, and I'm guessing he's trying to get a new token. Like, under what occasions would we try that? What would be the quickest troubleshooting for that?
In my experience, if AMA is not showing, the best thing to do is just to close ACT and reopen it, or
Okay.
restart. If they're using connected services, restart the connect link, and then go out and come back in, and it should reload. I don't think it passes a new token when you do that. It only does it the first time that I'm aware of when you click on marketing automation, and it doesn't attempt to do it again in your ACT session. So that's one of the reasons why I say, if you're having issues getting this page to load, close ACT and reopen it, because I don't think it goes out and attempts to get a new token unless you do that.
Right. And if you get that login screen, there's no way around it. You're restarting, right?
Correct. If you get the login screen, that means the token is expired and you need to close ACT and reopen it to get a new token.
Okay.
So the next thing we have here is restore emails. But before, I kind of want to skip this one for right now and just talk a little bit about this, because it's kind of related to what we're talking about here, making sure that the customer has these permissions here. These permissions, as you can see here, are pretty self-explanatory as far as what they do, that you have in the list here, where you have AMA admin that allows user to manage AMA configuration and scoring rules. You have the assets one, which allows access to the assets. You have the campaigns ones, which allows them to create, edit, and delete campaigns. Campaign dashboards allows access to the statistics. The integration data allows modifying and recurring of campaigns via AMA. Landing pages allows to create, modify, and the landing pages. This allows the results from the submissions. This allows you to edit templates, and then this allows you to look at and create web activity. To get to those things, you simply just go into tools, manage users, pick a user, add permissions, and you just check and see if they have access to those things under here.
Is there anything that you would recommend not giving to people that are just doing the marketing side?
Maybe the admin stuff. They don't necessarily need the admin stuff in there. If they don't have access to the web activity and the assets, or you don't see them utilizing those things, those things aren't necessary to have in there either.
Okay.
I would say that web activity is probably one of the least used things out of all of our customers.
Agreed.
So having access to that isn't necessarily something that they need to see. and may spark questions that if the company is not utilizing that feature, that you don't necessarily need to answer.
Right.
But that's basically what we're talking about. And then inside the contacts here, if you go to contact access, this is what we were talking about, where we have limited access or not. And so the particular issue that I was troubleshooting with Michael, a customer had put limited access on a bunch of their contacts, but the person who was sending the campaigns and trying to retrieve the data didn't have access to the limited access group. So they were sending it as one user, but trying to retrieve the data using another user, and it wasn't working. And so that was causing the problem. And then setting them all to public, or making sure that the users who are doing the reading and the writing as well as the sending all have access to whatever the limited access group is, will help solve that particular problem. So that's another thing to keep in mind. If you have, campaign results that aren't showing up in here, you may want to go and check and see if the contact access is set to limited access, because that could be causing the problem. And in that case, the user that created the campaign may not have access to the contact any longer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, what's next on our list?
So next on our list is restore email feature when latest campaign updates are gone. So what we're talking about is
latest template changes are gone.
Yeah.
And this is something that I covered a little bit last week. If you get anyone that, and this seems to have happened to me more than anyone, and I'm not sure why, but I will work on a template on one computer. I'll come into the office to finish it, and when I open it, I find that it doesn't reflect the recent changes that I made. And at the very beginning, I would go back and I would make the changes again, very frustrated, until I spoke to Chad and he said, check the restore email. And I found that it was loading not the most current version of that template.
Yeah. And so if you're having issues with it not loading it, and one thing that I always recommend is, if you copy a campaign, regardless of how you create the campaign, before you actually go out and send it, click this save button. Because if you don't click the save button, it will not create a restore to restore it from. So again, to get to restore, I go to actions, restore email. And then under restore, I'm going to have the different versions available to restore it from. And as you can see, the only version that I have is the one from when I created this campaign on January 12th.
But it will show you the ones that are more current, and
Correct.
while it doesn't render it perfectly, at least you can see the content that you're looking for.
Correct.
Yes, and I use save all the time.
Yeah. It's important that you do that. A lot of times people will, like copy a campaign, and then they'll go in there and they'll see that the template that they want to use is already inside of the campaign when they copied it. And then they won't click save after they've made some changes to that particular copy. And what ends up happening sometimes, or what used to end up happening, and I haven't seen an escalation like this in probably a year and a half, so I don't know if it's still happening. But what would happen is the customer, because they didn't click save, it would send out the old version of the campaign instead of the new version, because it was never saved.
So I'll tell you what Chad discovered recently is that our account was listed as advanced -plugin. And because of that, we weren't seeing certain features like social sharing and other things like that. So Chad made some changes to our account. So I think it now just says advanced. I haven't experienced that issue, because I can tell you I save as compulsively as anyone. So that isn't what's behind the issue I experienced, but that may just be that we were using a very, very legacy, which Andy, you've detected a few issues with the bad connectors and things like that. Because we go back to the very first day AMA was introduced. So a lot of garbage was carried forward from that. So we may not have that issue again, which would be great, and why we're experiencing it more than others.
Yeah. And what you're talking about there is the different security roles that a customer is in. And you can find out what security role a customer is on by clicking on my account and going to subscription info, and it'll say what
Yeah, so
version
that's what
you
mine
are.
said. Mine said
Yeah.
advanced bracket plugin, and he fixed it so it doesn't say that anymore.
Yeah. And so that was the original security group that was created, and most of our ACCs will be on that. And all it takes really is to change what's included inside of the security role. And so he probably changed you over to a security role that has the things that you were missing
Yeah,
in it. Um, and a way to check that, I do have your guys' account pulled up, or right here.
that's what it says now. Yeah.
Yep. And so that is what Ken is talking about, is the security role that is the account is provisioned under. And this is set by Salesforce when the customer gets to your account. Now our ACC accounts are going to be different because they were manually created. So they don't go through the same process that the customers do. So if you guys are having difficulties with your own accounts, get in contact with me and we can look at it.
Okay.
But that's a good way to troubleshoot those things. And then the next thing on the list here is we have DKIM issues. So what we're talking about here is the DKIM, and then that's one of the major reasons why I pulled up your account, Ken, is I wanted to be able to show what you want to do with DKIM. So when a customer is setting up DKIM, what they're going to do is they're going to come in here, they're going to go to email domains, and they're going to get a list of all the email domains that are available. Now, this is stuff that was created originally and they no longer work. This was that SparkPost ActOps test stuff. And so what I did when I was working on Ken's account is I went in here and changed these particular options to disabled or bad connector so that we know that those ones no longer work. I don't have the permissions to delete this stuff. And I'm not aware that Chad actually deletes these anymore either, because he likes to have them in there for record of, whatever domains they've ever used on the account. And so that's why they still show in there. But the different domains that we have show here. And if you click on edit and a customer has clicked on to set up the DKIM, what they're going to get is they're going to get this information here. This is the value that they're going to enter into their text record for the encryption key, and then the host name and the domain key is going to be different. Like the selector is going to be different configuration depending on what product they're using as their ISP. And so the article that we have here is actually a really good article because it links you to most of the main providers that we have. So I would just follow the steps in this article to go through everything. So this talks about going to where I just went to, clicking the button to set up DKIM. This is the information that it gives you after that. And then this is the information about how to add the text record. And this is the knowledge base articles for GoDaddy, Network Solutions, Bluehost, AWS, and Google domains. These are the articles that they have on how to do this in their service. So once you have gone through these steps of adding the text record to the DNS, you need to check and make sure that it's working correctly. And one way that I like to do that is I go to this website here, dkimcore.org/tools/keycheck. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the information from that record that we have here. And so the selector is this. So I'm going to copy that selector. And I'm going to put that in here. And then I'm going to take the domain name, which is keystroke.ca. I put that in there. And then I just click check. And If it comes back as invalid, that means that they don't have the text record set up correctly on their DNS server. But as you can see, Ken has correctly set up this DKIM record on his server. And so it gives a valid response. And that's really all that you need to do to get DKIM set up. And that's generally the amount of troubleshooting that I do with a customer, you know, in order to look and see if they have it set up, is I just check, you know, I check the selector, I check the DKIM key. If you're unsure of whether they have the correct information or not, there is another place that I can go and check and see if maybe something has changed. Like maybe you might think that the serial or the encryption key is not correct. So what I can do is I can copy that information from here. And then I can go back to this website. And I'm going to open up a new page just so that we can see that it loaded fresh. I'm going to put this DKIM key in there and I'm going to check it. And this just checks to see if the encryption key is valid. So it doesn't check the domain and the selector. It's just checking to see if the encryption key is valid. So that's one way that you can check and see if the encryption key is still valid and working. And that's from our end. If you think that this information might not be correct or something that might not be showing correctly, and I've seen this happen a couple of times in the last, you know, since 2018, I've seen it maybe happen 3 or 4 times. So not very often, but it does happen. If you think that that information is incorrect, what I can do is I can come into our actual domain tool and I can check in SparkPost to see what the actual DKIM key is for your domain and check and see if that host name is correct and if the DKIM value is correct. And so we can give them this information directly from SparkPost. If you feel like the information might be showing incorrectly inside of the ACT interface here, we can go directly into SparkPost and I can get you that information and make sure that it's showing correctly. So that's about as much as we do with the DKIM troubleshooting.
Yes, and just to be clear, don't go to Andy asking for someone's DKIM. He doesn't have it, and he won't have it. And that's a text file that's added to the DNS server, so you've got to arrange with your hosting provider.
Yep. I'm more than happy to make sure they have the correct information that they're trying to put in there if they're having problems getting it to validate, but I cannot put it in there for them or walk them through how to put that in there with their hosting provider. They need to do that either through these knowledge base articles or they need to contact their provider and do that.
Okay, good. What else have we got? Because I've got one question at the end. Okay, so
this is the using inclusions list instead of auto sync feature. Now, I'm not exactly sure what you guys are talking about.
We can skip past that. I was just basically I was harvesting the dark web this morning looking for, you know, every AMA question posted because I had to come up with a list for you. So that's what I was doing.
I do know that we ran into one customer who had the same group in the campaign multiple times, and it was actually causing the campaign to fail loading because it tried to load all those groups at once. So be mindful that when you're inside of your campaign here, not only does it try and load the primary group that you have under the campaign properties, but it also tries to load inclusions list and exclusion lists every single time when it tries to do a sync. And so if you have 15 groups listed in here, or maybe the same group as the main group that you had listed at the beginning, it will try and load all those groups. And if it fails at any of them, it will pause the campaign.
So this brings up a question that I've run into Most of the time that I load a group into a campaign, it works, it chugs, and I get presented with this campaign screen. However, there's one group that has about 15,000 contacts where it just times out. It's saying it's trying, and then it brings me back to the same screen as if nothing has happened. Is there a group quantity where, you know, anything beyond a certain total, we should expect that kind of timeout?
No, and I would say that that's probably something else related to the group, because when we go out to get the groups, we do it in pages of 2000. And I can show you guys that here real quick. So,
Because I can tell you mine fails every single time for one particular group, and I just cancel it out, go back into and edit the campaign because it's already created, and then I go back and I can start it.
so this right here gives you an example of what the search we do, or the call we make to get the contacts. It's not quite exactly this, but it's like this. So we go out and get pages of 2000 and then skip to the next one, and so it does it in groups of 2000. So if it times out during the middle of trying to get one of those sets of 2000, then it's going to stop and it's going to pause the campaign. So that's what we're looking at when we try and connect to it and we try and pull the groups. If it has more than 2000 contacts in it, we're going to be paging it, and we're going to be getting groups of 2000. And during that entire process, if it disconnects for a certain amount of time, then it's going to pause the campaign. If we go here into campaign logs, it does it multiple times when it tries to do it, and it'll put a log in here if it attempts to pull contacts from the group and it fails at any point. It's going to put that in the log here, and then it'll say retrying. So it doesn't just pause it immediately the first time it fails. I believe it tries it 3 times, and if it fails all 3 times, then it pauses it.
So let me ask you a question, because I thought that was really clever doing it, but maybe not. If it goes back to that screen where it's created the campaign, but it can't load it, and then I exit out and then I go back into the campaign by editing it, and there it is waiting for me. If I continue on with that campaign, am I running the risk of having less than the full group?
No.
Okay.
You would not be, because if the only thing you need to do is just make sure that all those groups are listed in there. And that's why we always recommend, before you ever send anything, before you click activate, run a list simulation and make sure that the contacts are showing up in that list simulation.
Okay.
Because that's the one surefire way to make sure that it's pulling those groups. And if you get that list simulation back, not only do I have proof that the list simulation was done, because we do have an audit log that shows the list simulations that were done by customers, and I can go back in there and I can see that and see if it actually did pull contacts or not.
Okay.
But
So
it also makes it easier for them to be assured that it's going to send the contacts that they want it to send to.
okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left. We've got 2 items left on the list, and then I have one quick question about sending text-based to emails. Is it worth covering social sharing? My impression from Chad is that this feature is going to get yanked.
Yeah, and that's what Chad has told me on multiple occasions. I would say that the reason why mail merge fields don't work inside of that is because we'd have to completely redesign social sharing and host those social sharing pages that are sent. So we'd have to create a merged version and store that somewhere, and we don't do that currently. So that's why there's no merge fields in there.
So I don't want to worry about that then. So there are going to be some tweaks to the select tier starting April. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. Are you?
No, they haven't said anything. They don't tell me when they're changing, like, the permissions on different security roles and stuff like that.
Okay, so what I am aware of, or what I've been told, is that decisions and list syncs are going to be added to the select tier. So it will actually be marketing automation as opposed to, e-marketing. So that's pretty cool. But the select feature for landing pages is one of those taste great, less filling features where it allows you to capture contacts, but my understanding is it doesn't allow you in the select tier to put them into a particular group, which makes harvesting the results pretty tricky. Is that accurate, or is there a trick to getting around that?
Yeah, I mean, so because you're using ACT, there's a trick to getting around that. When you create a campaign, normally what you do is on the end page, you know, edit end actions, you come here and you can add the contacts to a group, right? That's normally what you would do if you have a customer who's, you know,
But is
creating
this of it?
No, this
But
is not a select
no,
account, but
no.
this is an example of what someone should have. Now, what I would do instead is on my form here, what I would do is I'd add a hidden question. I don't
Oh,
actually want
okay.
to
So
edit this
it
one.
writes to a field and then it dynamically populates the database. Good idea.
Correct. So
Perfect.
I would create that added field here.
And just like populate it. I am new, and it goes
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you just go, you know, when you're editing this, you just make sure that the field is hidden, so that
Perfect.
they can't see it, and map it to whatever that field, you know, you
Whatever
want that to
user
map
ID.
to,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
have it create the group dynamically.
Perfect. That's an excellent tip. Thank you. The last question I've got, and I don't know how much this is going to interest people, but if you go into email templates, and let's say, and I was really excited about this text feature, and then less so when I realized I couldn't do anything with it. So I wanted to create an email campaign that looked like an Outlook email. Okay. And I created the template, and then I clicked on, you know, actions and, you know, convert to text or something like that. I forget the menu option, but then I couldn't save it. So every time I clicked on return, it went back to the template. So I thought, okay, maybe I've kind of projected a little bit and I don't know what that plain text feature is.
Okay, I know what you're talking about now. So that main plain text feature, let me get into a template that actually has some value. Let's see. No, that's a form. We'll use this one. So that is made for deliverability, Ken, not for anything else. So it's to help with deliverability. So let's say that I have this content inside of my campaign, right?
Right.
And I come here and I want to change the plain text or save the plain text option.
Yeah, that could.
That feature.
I don't have the plain text option either when I look at my templates.
So that is going to be part of the security role, would be my guess. And I'm guessing that the advanced plugin one is no longer showing that option in there, which I don't understand why it's not, but I can change that. Let's go here to Ken's account and look at that option underneath here. And I'm just going to pick one. I'm not going to make any changes to it, Ken. I just want to show them what it is that you're talking about. Well,
That's odd.
Yeah, it was showing in there. It's not showing in there anymore. Let me check the security roles and see if they've removed that option.
You know, I don't want to make everyone suffer through this discovery. Can you just explain what, because it clearly isn't what I thought it was for.
Yeah, so what that is the plain text option is for multi-part email messages. What it does is it makes it so that if they have it set up to not load the template, if the contact is not a known contact in the database, or they think it might be something where it doesn't load the images and stuff like that, what it is the text version of the email. And all that will do is if they have a very stringent anti-spam software, all it does is send the text version of the email.
Okay.
So you would still have your HTML version, and all you do in that text version is you just put the text, and you would put the raw URLs for any URLs that you have linked in there. And it's not going to show any images in that text version. And so instead of showing, you know, a mock version that it automatically tries to figure out when it doesn't load images normally, what it's going to do is it's going to show that text copy that you create instead. And that can sometimes help you get a better score on an anti-spam utility. That's all that does.
Okay.
And I have done that once before, and I went from a 9.8 rating using the mail tester utility to a 10, a perfect score, when I used the text version of it. So that's all that used to do.
Okay, so I just misunderstood its purpose. That's fine. I thought that maybe you guys had added a new feature that allowed Outlook type deliverability for just plain text emails to add to a campaign, but that was perhaps wishful thinking.
Yeah, that would be
it was my understanding if you want to do that, you could just go into the HTML editor and create the email with just text in there. Is that not correct?
Well, I mean, you can do that if you have access to the WYSIWYG editor. You could just put it in there, but it would still come as an HTML file.
And now when AMA first started, that used to be an advanced feature, but now it's available in all 3 paid tiers. So
yeah.
But the HTML editor is, it's certainly usable. I just thought that they had built something that was, a lot more simple.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was my misunderstanding. We are out of time, Andy. I certainly don't want to impose more than you've already generously given. But I'll just wrap up. Any quick questions, guys? I don't want to leave anything, any loose ends. Okay.
Thanks, Andy. Very, very much appreciated.
Yeah, no problem at all. And
Excellent.
I will send you over, Ken, a copy of the recording for this.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll get that ripped, and I'll send you guys over the Vimeo link afterwards. That's going to be really valuable because I know a lot of the utilities that you showed us and the links that you were using will be a great resource. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And have a great day. And thanks to everyone for attending. I hope this was of value. Take care.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.